Coming up tonight, the winds continue. The Anthem hits a few tones, and she takes a flop. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 4 of the cruise view from onboard the Anthem of the Seas for Sunday, May 6th, 2018. Once again, I'm Picone, and today was our second sea day, of course, with that break for Bermuda in the middle. Our noontime location was 25 degrees and 30 minutes north by 63 degrees and 57 minutes west. We were traveling at a speed of about 20 knots. We've been holding a pretty steady, fast speed this entire voyage so far of roughly 20 knots. And of course, our next stop is St. Martin as we head south. As for the weather, we had a sunrise at 5:52 a.m. this morning with a sunset tonight at 6:30 p.m. All day we had temperatures in the upper 70s, absolutely beautiful, sunny looking skies for the most part. A little bit of cloudiness, but nothing major. And like I said, those absolutely beautiful upper 70 temperatures. But unfortunately, even with the seas at a relatively calm condition, we did have extremely high winds once again today, and that causes all kinds of problems, especially on a ship the size of the Anthem of the Seas, which really catches the wind on the side and can cause a little bit of rocking even when the seas aren't doing the rocking. But that wind did cause a couple issues throughout the day. Obviously 40 miles an hour is a very high speed, and at some points it must have been even higher than that. Because as for our compass summary of what went on today, this morning started out for me at 9 a.m. with a North Star ride that we'd made reservations for. We were one of 2 North Star rides that made it in this morning before they halted it due to the high winds. And back on our quantum sailing, I did do one ride on North Star where they really put in a lot of effort to override all the security stuff that was in place to stop operations under unsafe conditions in order to allow it to function in really high winds. And today's was not quite as bad, but it was definitely rocking closer to that than any other ride that I've done so far of North Star. And on day 2, while we were waiting out the wind for the iFly, they did mention that the North Star, if the speeds get above 50 miles an hour for the winds, they are forced to halt it. So I'm guessing that those winds must have been approaching that and possibly eclipsing that at points this morning. Following our ride on North Star then, as I mentioned, this was a very special sailing for us. Of course, last year I lost my father while we were on board the Anthem of the Seas and had to cut that series short, so we rebooked it in order to send him off appropriately as he wanted, disperse his ashes to the seas. And this morning at 10 a.m. we had a private burial at sea ceremony held with the assistance of Royal Caribbean. So for this, I made arrangements with Royal Caribbean ahead of time when I first made this booking to ensure that everything was in place and they were aware of everything before we got on board the ship. Once we were on board, we needed to have the death certificate, the cremation certificate, as well as a certificate of some form certifying that the urn was biodegradable in order for us to be allowed to throw it overboard. So the day that we arrived on the ship on Thursday, we went to guest services. They made copies of everything and cleared it all. They then contacted us to determine an exact time that we wanted to have this occur, since everything has to be approved by both the captain as well as the environmental officer. And this morning we met at guest services with the environmental officer as well as a representative from guest services and a member of the security team who took us down to the aft mooring deck below 270, actually 2 floors below the entrance of 270, roughly deck number 3. From there, they said a quick little prayer and then were able to send him overboard, and watch him go on his way as we sailed on our way. So that was at 10 o'clock this morning. It took roughly 20 to 30 minutes, but it was a nice little ceremony and perfect way to follow up a ride on North Star that we did bring him on board this morning for. So then later in the day at 1 o'clock, we had a traditional cruise sea day event, the belly flop competition. You usually see that on sailings, and today's course was hosted by Chloe, the cruise director. And there was some concern about whether or not it would be able to go on with such high winds, but they did manage to pull it off. But the winds were still high enough that even without them actually jumping in, just standing near the pool, there was so much sea mist flowing off of that pool because of the water splashing around.
The redder this chest gets, the more they will love you. Always go to the sympathy boat, okay? If you break an arm, you'll probably win. Okay, that's how it works. It really does. So, Corey, what's going to happen is we're going to count you in on 3, okay? You're going to go through the air, okay, like a majestic seagull. You're going to hit the ground. Well, not the ground, don't hit the water. Hit the water. We really want to see the screen explode with water. And then your fabulous crowd here, they're going to vote for you. Okay. So up to the end, we're going to count you in on 3. You can take it whatever way you feel is going to make the best impact. Okay? Please don't hurt yourself. I'm not insured. Oh, that's true. He's not for medical. We're okay. You will be paying for it should he hurt himself. Just that you know. That was in the fine print, by the way. Okay, on the count of 3. Okay, kids, step back. Step back. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I felt that. That was a good one. That was a good one to get us going. Okay. I go in, you're all going in.
And then for all of our return cruisers, today was the day of the top tier events. They held an event at both 11 a.m. and at 4:30 p.m. I went to 4:30 p.m. They were both held in 270. Pretty low key compared to some of the other ones. There were no hors d'oeuvres or anything, just simple champagne. But it was in 270. It featured Chloe, the cruise director, of course, introducing all the officers, as well as Captain Sorensen coming out to say a few words, the next cruise specialist saying a few words, and then ultimately coming to an end with the thing that I've been waiting on since I first saw it from Nick Weir's Twitter account. Didn't get to see it last year, but finally got to see the Royal Fleet, the absolute most beautiful Vistarama they've got right now. And sometimes these events do give us some extra information. Still don't have those numbers on how many guests are actually on board, because it definitely feels empty. Of course, said that last year, and we're at, I think, 102%. But I did get some Crown and Anchor numbers. We do have 2,600 return guests on board this sailing, so those numbers at least were a bit higher than I was expecting, because the Diamond Lounge is not crowded, and it overall does not feel like it's that heavy of the return cruisers like we've seen on some other sailings, but it still is a pretty high number. And then following that, of course, with that being 4:30, we then went straight into our 5:30 early dinner. Today's menu, surprisingly, I didn't see very much. Usually day 2 is always that problem. This is the first time I've had an issue with another day, so I actually got some off-menu items. Today I got a chicken noodle soup, which I believe is on the children's menu and offered as a secondary soup if asked. And for my entree, they made a special lasagna just for me that was absolutely delicious. It was different than the lasagna that we had yesterday, but it was still delicious and possibly even better than that lasagna. And then for my dessert, I got the no sugar added chocolate cappuccino, which was almost like a mousse dessert that tasted exactly like a tiramisu, as well as the creme brulee, a standard item off of the menu. And then for our evening show tonight at 8:15, they had the Las Vegas Tenors as our headlining act. And this is a group of three men who sing not exclusively opera music, as I like to point out, but tenor music, which is the highest vocal range that a male singer can perform at. And that included a variety of songs, some of them a little bit newer, but mainly older classical style songs. And that seemed to get a lot of the older audience into the crowd, maybe not so much of the younger audience. It seemed a little more on the same page as that Earl Turner style show, where it appeals to a certain type of crowd. And that started the night of 3 different entertainment acts to end the evening, because following that, right outside the Royal Theater then in the Schooner Bar, was Matt Yee's Outrageous Adult Sing-Along Show, an adult-only Schooner Bar act, something you don't see very often on a cruise ship. And even with it adults only, it packed the place in. You could not move, you could not get through the Schooner Bar. It was filled from the Royal Theater, people standing in the elevator lobby and the Focus Photo Gallery, all the way down along almost to Azumi, just to try and be a part of the event. It was a huge hit, and one that I think he's done 2 nights possibly so far this sailing, but this was the first time that I caught it. It was certainly entertaining, and I believe he's back tomorrow night and a few other nights this sailing.
My passenger said to that day, 3-hour tour. How long? 3-hour travel. The weather started getting rough. The time the ship was tossed. Did not put the courage of the fearless through. The mill would be lost. What? The mill would be lost. Just shake out, 2 hands out, 2 hands out. Elevator 2. 1, 2, 3. Oh! No, but you, ma'am. You're going like this. All right, one more time. 1, 2, 3. Oh! Okay, all right. I'll do it just for you in slow motion. 2 hands out. 1, 2, 3. Oh! 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. This guy is just staring at me like I'm the bowling ball return.
And then an hour into that, I then went from the Schooner Bar over to 270 to see Led Zeppagain for their 3rd night of performing, this time over in 270 for a much larger scale high-end performance featuring the Vistoramas, advanced lighting, and of course all the special magic of 270. And that lasted until midnight to really kind of wrap that night up. And then for interview today, we've got an extra special interview that's perfect for today. So today I'm joined by Ghana, who is the guest services manager on board the Anthem of the Seas. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So could you give a little bit of background on yourself?
So my name is Ghana. I've been with the company for the last 20 years. My first ship was the Sovereign of the Seas, and she doesn't sail with us anymore. Mm-hmm. I first started as a cleaner and worked my way through guest relations, as that's what we called it back in those days. And here I am now as the guest services manager.
So with the guest services area, what is the scope of the responsibilities that fall under you?
I have the printers who take care of the collateral on board the vessel. I have the group coordinator whose primary responsibility is handling our groups and their needs. I have guest administrative officer who takes care of the clearance in and out of port. I have the guest departure officer who handles the departure process when we are primarily within our home port. She also handles lost luggage cases. I have the concierges, the suite concierge as well as the diamond concierge. I have the genies, which is a new program we've implemented for the vessels that have loft suites. I have, on this particular ship, I have 2 assistant front desk managers and a front desk manager, and then I have the front desk staff.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
So what is the requirement to work within the guest services area?
Basic would be customer service skills. The rest can be taught along the way. But if you have the basics in terms of customer service skills, that sets the right foundation for standing at the front desk. A lot of crew members on board aspire to get to guest services, but then when they realize the brunt of what we deal with, it's really an eye-opener. Mm-hmm. So if you have worked in hotels before or you have basic customer service skills, that sets the tone.
Okay. So with the guest service area being the front line for any questions people have, that's obviously going to be a vast array of different topics. How do you handle so many different areas?
There's no script. And as an example, Anthem is always busy. It's a busy ship. So we go day to day and handle the situations as they come. You would have the repetition or the repeated cases of lost luggage, maintenance issues, etc., which are the easy ones to handle. But when the situations get complicated, for instance, right now today, we have a medical situation, and we're not sure yet if we may have a medevac or if the patient will go all the way into port with us. Mm-hmm. So those are situations where it's touch and go to know hour by hour how we proceed. Yeah.
So then, expanding on that a little bit more, last year everybody knows that I had a situation on board the Anthem of the Seas, and guests can always prepare and they can always find information about what to do when they are planning their cruise, but there are topics that nobody plans for, that nobody really knows how to handle, but your division is there to assist in those times.
Yes.
So for instance, if somebody has an emergency at home and they need to find out and get back as quickly as possible, how would your area assist them?
Well, it starts with, if you, our corporate office would send a message to us to say the family is trying to reach out to these guests, and then the guests on board will come and say, I have a situation, I need help, I need to go home. Depending on where we are at the time, it may be that particular day or it may be in another port. We'll reach out to the port agent via our guest administrative officer or myself and see what logistics are in place. Sometimes we get into port and there's no flights on that particular day to leave in a timely manner for the person to get where they're going. So all those things need to be taken into consideration. Sometimes our guests didn't cater for an additional expense of having to leave in the voyage, and there's also procedures in place to help them with that if we have to purchase the flights, etc. for them. Generally, we also have a program called Care Team. So when there's a difficult situation, be it a death or otherwise, we will have one of our staff to stay with you, even to help you pack, to assist you with phone calls, etc., to help you along the way. Yes.
And then if somebody is on board and they have their own medical issue on board the ship, how would you handle ensuring they get the best attention they can possibly get?
For instance, I'll use the example of the family we have now. The guest is in the medical facility, the family is there, we've connected with them already to ask if they need anything, if they need any phone calls, because right now it's just a waiting game per se. That said, if they need to talk to someone for the time that they're here, we can also make ourselves available. I'm a major part of the care team, and it's pretty much what I do all day, listen to our guests and their concerns. So it's not a problem if they just want to talk, someone to listen to them, to get them through the circumstance. We can also deal with that.
And then another big area that people are often probably most concerned about when on a cruise is, what if the ship leaves without me while I'm in port? How do you take care of those guests that may unfortunately be left behind?
Each port that we sail into, we have a port agent. So as an example, someone may get stuck in traffic. The guests at times reach out to our corporate office, so we are aware of them and we try to figure out the logistics of how long it's going to take, and the vessel will wait for you. If push comes to shove and we have to leave, then the port agent will stay on the port until the guests arrive. Usually it's within an hour, that we are told the guest has showed up, and then we try to get you to the next port of call. If, let's say, it's the last port of call and we have 2 days at sea and we are heading back to Bayonne, New Jersey, then the guest will fly back to Bayonne. On board, we have the procedures where we'll pack your belongings, we'll list them so that you can see everything will be listed for you, and then we'll have them waiting for you in the port. But the port agent in the respective port will be online to assist hotel arrangements, etc. for the guests. Yes.
Okay. And then sometimes, once people are back home and they're planning their future cruises, they decide they want to do something special. For instance, we did a burial at sea this sailing. How can guests go around making those special arrangements and ensuring everything is going to be handled right?
Again, reaching out to our corporate office. It could be burial at sea or just, a moment for the family to regroup, etc. We are informed on board, and then once the family reaches out to us, or on the first day, we sometimes leave a voicemail depending on the situation to connect with us so that we can plan, because there's restrictions in terms of where the vessel has to be for the burial at sea to take place. So once all those logistics are organized, then we meet with the family, get a take on what they would also want in terms of the burial at sea, and then we take it from there.
So you've been on the Anthem a little bit. Do you have any future plans? Are you going to stick with her?
Anthem is going to be my home at least for another year. In my position, we generally stay on board ships for 3 years at a time, even though I've done longer on some vessels, and then we move around the fleet. This is my 11th ship, so who knows where I'll end up again.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you'd like to tell the viewers?
Please do come by and board any of our Royal Caribbean ships. Some people think that they look too big and they hold too many people, but when you get on board, you realize it's well distributed and you will enjoy yourself and have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So that wraps up this episode of the Cruise View. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, we will be in St. Martin, and later arrival at 12:15, an afternoon arrival. That'll keep us there until about 8 p.m. So be sure to tune in tomorrow for that. I believe we are the only ship in port, something a little bit rare for St. Martin, but it'll still be an enjoyable day in port for everybody on board. So be sure to tune in for that. And once again, I'm Derek Cohn. Stay tuned for the links.